can't get a link to the show till you go, oh, we are live.
Oh my god, we don't even know how to do this anymore.
No, we don't.
So bad. We're just amateurs, amateur YouTubers.
Amateur hour. Yep, amateur hour.
Going live with at DevoCut. Where did DevoCut come from exactly? Can you explain that to me?
Nothing specific. I was looking for something that was short, and so and I don't know. So a few people that I know were calling me Devo at the time, and I kept like trying different adjectives and things to throw on the end, but the only thing that was kind of short and wasn't lengthy, like Devo Shooter, was like too lengthy. Like so, cut was just cool because it's like an action word and it's really short, and no one bought the domain. So. And on top of that, too, like a lot of places I go, like that username is not in use, but it's 6-7 characters long. So it's hard to find 7 characters that aren't in use all over the internet. But still, like somehow, you could say it and someone will know how to spell it, more or less. So
no one ever takes one lone dork. So I've got
yeah, no, you're lucky on that one. Yeah.
All right, you ready to start the show?
I'm ready to start the show.
In 5, 4, 3, 2. What? We have intro music. And no logo because I forgot to load it up.
It's our first day. Give us a break.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of the DSLR Film Noob podcast, where we occasionally get together, mostly to rant with Devin. What have you been up to, Devin? It's been another month, another dollar. We have not talked for a while, and we actually spent probably 20 minutes just chatting each other up before the show. So what's going on, man?
Yeah, because it has been a long time. My gosh, it's been just me doing random odd jobs in terms of filmmaking. I've been practicing my writing. I've been studying a lot of story technique and things like that. A lot of boring stuff that I can't share a whole lot about because it's not entertaining to share. But still, having a lot of fun over at Red Bull, doing a lot of live media broadcasts and things like that, as well as, the typical thing, been bumping around Hollywood, a few other people doing a few music videos, a few documentaries and things like that. So, mostly having a good time, except that my Blackmagic camera did totally, like, the HDMI port failed, and then Blackmagic didn't necessarily want to replace it for free, and then but still, like, we're like, hey, we'll give you this one-time deal of $500, we'll give you a new camera, and I'm thinking
$500 for a 4-year-old kid. Come on.
Yeah, because it's 4 years old now, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, the rest of the camera works, it's just the HDMI port, but the Blackmagic doesn't seem to, like, fix parts or anything like that, so I'm like, $500 and all I'm going to get back is a working HDMI port. Because the rest of the camera worked fine. It's a poorly designed, like, connector. They didn't reinforce it or anything like that. So I'm a little disappointed. But considering used Blackmagic cameras are still $700 for unknown reasons, it's kind of just how I have to deal with it. So
on a Blackmagic pocket camera, I don't think I've seen one of those in the wild in probably 2 years or better. That's long in the tooth, man.
Well, you think that's long in the tooth. Every time I get on set, and a lot of the time I get hired as a B camera for someone who's running Blackmagic as the A, but every time I get on set, it's a 2.5 Blackmagic Cinema camera. Those are super popular here. You'd still get them, for like $1,500 you can get them. I was actually looking at getting that instead of a Blackmagic Pocket, but then remembered it wouldn't work with any of my Micro Four Thirds lenses because it's a passive mount. So I couldn't do iris or any of those kind of things on it. But they're super popular. So whenever I go to a set and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to be shooting on a Blackmagic, it's like never an Ursa or Ursa Mini or anything like that. It's always this 2.5. It's not even the 4K. It's the 2.5K camera. And I guess for low-end budget stuff, that's just become the like de facto standard because it looks pretty good even though it doesn't do low light, and everyone just likes, I guess, being able to shoot ProRes and that high quality. Everyone gravitates to it. I don't get it. Even for documentary use, I see people running around with 2.5K Blackmagic Cinema cameras, so go figure.
I'm not a Hollywood guy, and I shoot mostly in the Midwest and the Pacific Northwest, and out here it's almost exclusively GH5s and Sony A7S Mark IIs. Like, I see the A7S Mark II almost everywhere. It's ubiquitous in the low budget to mid budget range in these areas. I don't know what's going on with that, but it's really popular. And then the GH4 is still pretty well a staple. Myself, those are the two cameras I'm using, so maybe that's why I'm on the lookout for them. If you guys are wondering where I've been, I got a new job, so I'm not shooting for a living anymore all the time. I do occasionally still shoot. I did manage a feature length about 3 months ago, and one commercial job since then. Otherwise, I've actually been doing CNC. So if you look at this bad boy right here, if any of you guys out there are interested in a really nice mahogany or oak case for your keyboard, here's my sales pitch. There you go. Go buy one, neodymium magnets, all the works. Hipsters seem to love the crap out of these things. So that's about it, really. Otherwise, lots of overtime, lots of work, nothing else exciting to report, except the actual film festival I run just wrapped up 2 days ago, and it was a complete success. So thanks to all the filmmakers that submitted their films and to everybody that showed up. I think we had over 800 people attend. So the Grand Film Festival, Prairie Lights, did really well. And thanks again to all the Midwest filmmakers out there. So anything else, Devin, before we move on to the news?
No, I think we're ready for the news.
Okay. So I will try and hit the right cue. Time for the news. So we've missed a lot. We continue to miss a lot. But guess what? I'm a GH5 shooter, and Devin is a Panasonic shooter. The firmware update has been released. I did install that. Apparently, there was a 2.0 followed by a 2.1. And that added some autofocus correction. I am still happy with my GH5. Devin, do you think anybody is really going out and buying these really expensive memory cards to shoot the 400 megabit Kodak that would allow you maybe 30 minutes on a 256 gig card?
I mean, probably not. I can imagine there's a few people out there who, it justifiably 400 megabit, you could kind of see as a replacement for doing ProRes. I mean, you're talking about taking the H.264 codec so far that you're well exceeding what we would consider Blu-ray quality and things like that. So considering it's going so high with it, I guess, yes, if people want to spend the money on the memory card so that they don't have to bring around an Atomos with SSDs or something like that, then there's going to be a handful of people that do it. I really feel like for most people who are in the market for this camera, and we're talking about the vloggers, the internet video makers, things like that, as well as like small end business shooters and things, I don't think that they need that much quality. And so while it's great to have, and no one's going to complain that we have the option to if we need more for visual effects or something like that, it's hard to necessarily justify the price till those cards come down. But like all the other memory cards, I'm sure that they're going to start falling in price after a year or two, especially with more technology able to use it.
So speaking of price, have you seen the price of the GH5 lately?
It's slightly under 2,000. Actually, let me push up my glasses here. It's down to $1,500, guys. It's a really decent price. You can get some gray market GH5 action for as low as $1,500, and that's not used. That's actually new on eBay. So if you haven't upgraded yet and you're in the market to upgrade, that is the hotness right there. Also, I believe the Sony A6500 had a price drop recently too. Now it is down to a cool $1,000 if you are in the market for some 4K shooting. Devin, I know you were just lamenting your Blackmagic Pocket camera. Is anybody asking you for 4K out there? Really not. As far as I can tell, most producers or directors either aren't interested or don't really understand what 4K is and what it means on the big screen. They tend to just gravitate towards camera names And I haven't seen a lot of directors or producers talk about A7S. I know a lot of shooters talk about it, but I haven't seen people ask for it. Usually, the two things they're asking for is a red, or they're asking for a black magic. Of course, if they have the budget for an Arri Alexa, they don't ask for that. The DP just gets one if it's that kind of a shoot. But other than that, even small production shoots, I've seen shoots where they're maybe only spending a couple thousand for the day, will still be using red weapons, or the slightly older, whatever came after the red one MX, the Scarlet. I've seen a lot of Scarlets out there for low budget shooting, and then if it's really indie, then I'll see some Black Magic Cinemas. But other than that, I don't see anyone asking for DSLRs or even accepting a DSLR for a lot of this production stuff. And, you know, part of that's just looks. And it's kind of gone away just because the red can be a small camera and things like that. But it's still a reality that DSLRs in general, no matter how good they seem to get, there's still sometimes a negative connotation just based off the size, which is a bit silly.
I have seen a big backlash on DSLR shooters on set, actually. Some people that have, I don't want to say, well, yes, I will say, they're slumming it with me on a feature film. And the entire time I get to listen to them bitch about the cameras we're shooting on because they're used to more professional gear. And then I get a smile and say, well, then what are you doing here with me, buddy?
Yeah.
Sick bird. But seriously, for a while, like people were asking for Canon DSLRs. You know, they wanted a 5D Mark III or 5D Mark IV, 5D Mark II on every shoot. Now it's kind of gone back to more traditional cameras. I see bigger cameras out there more often now than I did in the last couple of years. And I don't know if DSLRs have finally just become unpopular again, if some of the people that were kind of spearheading them have moved on, or what's going on in the market. I still shoot on them, still get requests with my cameras, and no one really complains. But
sure. Well, and I think for any production where, let's say, you're in charge because you're the director, producer, and this is for a business commercial, this is for a music video, and the choice in how it's done is your decision, then I know a lot of shooters who do prefer the DSLR for the sake of speed, convenience, and all the options they get with lenses and things like that. But when someone else is running the production, here it's like a legitimate thing. I've seen it enough where up-and-coming DPs, even people without much experience, they'll just use a credit card and they'll buy a Blackmagic Cinema camera and like maybe 3 lenses and a shoulder rig, and then they'll just start trying to sell themselves as a DP for hire. And that seems to be like what everyone's gravitating towards as an in for being a DP here in the indie market in, you know, the Los Angeles area. And I can only speak to kind of my own experiences and things I bump into, but that's kind of what I'm seeing, which I find fascinating because especially when you talk about the quality we're getting out of the Panasonics, and even if you may not like the color, the quality of detail you're getting out of these Sonys, the 2.5K in the giant ProRes format and everything else kind of just seems long in the tooth, especially if you're not going to do a lot with that ProRes, which in a lot of indie productions, they barely even touch color. I'm really surprised at how sometimes either with time or the editing, the skills are lacking, and so they tend to just kind of grab the footage and throw it on there. So I mean, like
when you're moving fast, it's super cheap to just be like and get it on screen.
Oh yeah,
I'm
absolutely,
guilty, man. I've done it dozens of times where like I just clicked the vivid wheel and shot until I was done.
And just turn up the clarity, man. Look, it's like 8K.
Oh my god, so bad. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about some audio gear for a second. I got ripped off recently. I picked up one of these guys on eBay, except that instead of buying it from, say, this reputable seller I'm displaying right here, I bought it used, and the USB port was broken, the battery pack was missing, and the buttons were busted. It was unfortunate.
Wow.
So I didn't think eBay was in that sorry state anymore, but apparently that's the case. And Devin, you've posted some audio kit here in the show notes.
Yeah.
Now that I have a broken one, I might need something new. Tell me more about this mix pre.
So yeah, so this is the mixed pre's have already been pretty well accepted by a lot of the audio guys out there that I talk to. For being small, for being convenient, they're really kind of going toe to toe with what the Zoom's series is giving them with the H8 as well as the I think F4 or whatever it's called. Both of those recorders, they have things like time code and a bunch of other stuff that's really great. And one of the main complaints I had about the 6-channel mix pre is that it didn't have a time code option, or like it did it through HDMI or something kind of weird like that. This is obviously a bit more pricey. It's $1,800, and it has more channels than anyone would need because it records 8 channels as well as a stereo mix at the end of the day. So that's why they call it the 10T. But there's certain sets I've been on where, you know, and I see an audio guy running 2 decks. It's rare, but when you're on doing more reality stuff where you need to record 8 people at the same time, or 6 people and maybe like a few cameras and boom mics and things like that, it's for sound guys only. Most indie filmmakers are not going to need this many channels. You guys would be fine with just 3 or 4 channels, but I see enough of it that like they're rolling multiple like ancient sound device recorders all linked together in order to get enough channels to make this happen. And they see something like this and go, oh my gosh, my back would thank me if I just spent the money to get something like that. And it's still like, considering what sound devices normally cost, this is still really aggressive pricing. And it seems pretty clear that they really want to hit, Tascam, or not Tascam, I'm sorry, Zoom, where it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zoom's got that fairly decent 8-channel setup,
right.
That's got a phone app and everything. That's sort of what this looks like.
This is exactly what it looks like. It's got a phone app. This bigger one finally has a time code generation as well as receiving time code. So it can work on the bigger ones. You've got, of course, a USB audio interface, which Zoom likes to do with their gear. So yeah, it really does have all the features.
Solid though is like, normally when you think sound device, you think like a big giant chunk of metal that you can beat someone over the head with. This looks a little more plasticky, right?
Well, for sure. And I think they understand that the market's moving in a different direction, and they just don't want to get left behind. Because for a lot of smaller shooters and documentary work and everything else, a lot of them won't consider something like this, especially if he is a shooter and the sound recorder guy all at the same time. Because solo shooting is just a part of where we are now. It used to be kind of like, hey, when I do, interviews for your business or something like that and make a video, the cheap guys would do it all by themselves because you're getting it for cheap. But now it's even expected if a company's putting down a decent dollar for a production, that they kind of are expecting the guy to do everything at once in order to turn a profit. So I see things moving in that direction, and I think that they just want to make sure they get their piece of the pie, because Zoom has been pretty much unmatched. Obviously, if you go way down the price range, you've got Tascam and a few other contenders in that ballpark. But in this mid-tier range, Zoom has been uncontested, and a lot of sound guys I've talked to are like, yeah, I don't rely on it, but I'll run it as maybe a recorder through Sound Devices preamps. And now Sound Devices is giving them kind of what they want, which is a small, convenient package that has really great preamps and has the recording built into it.
I mean, honestly, I've been pretty happy with most of my Zoom kit. Continued to follow the upgrade path of find more Zoom crap. At some point, though, I feel like we've kind of reached saturation in the audio recording section. There hasn't been any huge advances from the days of the H4n to now as far as like handheld audio recording goes. Do you think most of these people are upgrading from their smaller 4-channel systems to big stuff, unless they're going to a pro sound kit?
As weird as it sounds, I think that this is more for people downgrading. I know that it sounds weird. I think that for people who, have been in the industry for a while, because a lot of the guys I bump into have been sound guys for longer than I've touched a video camera. And a lot of them have these huge kits of huge sound devices that do 12 tracks and all this crazy stuff. And more, because of times are rough and things like that, they're getting called on these smaller productions, and they don't want to carry around 2 crates of sound gear. And, they don't necessarily want to bring a blimp out every time they go out. And so these are the kind of guys who either for an auxiliary kit, a backup, or something like that are looking to get something smaller and lighter that they can trust. And so I kind of see people who are already sound device customers looking as this as a secondary backup or just a smaller kit for when they are not getting paid as much and don't need to bring out all the fancy gear. Or and then potentially people who have been looking at maybe getting a Zoom for a while but haven't pulled the trigger yet, it may be attractive for them too. But that's kind of how I see this, where no, I don't see anyone who has an H4 or a H8 or something like that looking to be like, oh, this is an awesome upgrade, I should definitely go for this. I think they're completely satisfied. And I think you're right. Besides improving some of the digital preamps, there's been no significant improvements made yet. And we've just been adding features like the iPad apps and everything else, which I don't think is bad at all. I think it's really cool. But I was also on set with a dude who had like a suitcase full of his gear, and then he like set up the sound recorder and then set up his iPad. And even though he was like wearing it and had a boom and everything else and the volume knobs right there, he like preferred to go over to the iPad and adjust it on there. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm like, the knob's right there, like there's a reason why it's convenient, it's right there, you can turn it. But to each their own. I kind of see some of these guys using some of these advanced features just because they can, not necessarily because it's helping them produce better audio. But there's obviously several situations where that kind of feature can come in really handy. I've just seen some people just using it because they can and it looks cool.
So up till 4 years ago, this was what I was using regularly on set. And this thing is an antique. I will not lie to you. This is literally the best that 2008 had to offer. This is the Fostex FR2. If those of you aren't familiar with it, it was a great recorder, classic. Capable of up to a 4 gig memory card in this monstrosity. But now you look at something like a Tascam DR70D, and what are you getting that's different from that? And that was like top notch back then, and that only did 2 tracks of audio. Now for $230 to $350, you can get a pretty sweet setup and spend all your money on microphones. And honestly, the last time I was hired to do sound, which has actually been about 6 or 8 months ago, they hired me simply because of the microphone list. They didn't give a crap about the recording unit I was using, which, that makes perfect sense to me. They want to make sure you have good boom mics, a good boom pole, and the sound quality, into most recording units is pretty darn good these days. And they wanted wireless kit. Wireless kit's always like a number one.
Yeah, that's huge, especially with directors and stuff. They want their wireless headphones for sure. The one thing to keep in mind, the reason why these mixed pre's are so much cheaper than the rest of the sound devices line is because of the fact that you're talking about things like their compressors or limiters or things like that are happening after the digital conversion. So you do have potential for having a saturated input. That being said, from what I've talked to with sound guys, it seems like Sound Devices has put so much headroom on these digital inputs that you're really not going to see the downfall of that having that kind of issue, where something on a Zoom doesn't have quite as much headroom, and it's a little bit more easier to saturate that and cause modulation and a ton of audio quality problems if you push the hardware too far. So that's part of how they're saving money and providing this at a lower cost, is that they are doing a lot of it digitally, but with Sound Devices' name attached to it, they're trying to do it in the best way that we can right now with the technology we have. So keep that in mind. It's not like, oh, this totally replaces, the Sound Devices, whatever, 20 grand audio setup. It's like, no, this is the cheap stuff and it's digital. It's just Sound Devices' take on doing cheap digital preamps.
One of those things I always tell kids who are getting into the market, like, don't spend too much on your recorder. And it's not that I'm saying that good preamps aren't necessary, but man, you can go to like 95% of the quality for a reasonable price, and that last 5% of awesome will cost you like $1,000. And you really have to have good ears to hear that. I mean, I'm older. I'll admit, look, balding guys, less hair, whatever. I can't hear as well as I used to. And some of those high tones and things that people swear make the difference, I don't hear them. Yeah. And often, what do? Like, I record 5 minutes of room sound after we're done, and then layer that underneath the track, which is basically a noise floor that's gonna ruin all of that like high quality sound that I've captured previously. So then what am I even doing? I don't know.
Well, and that being said, if young directors really want good audio, ADR is such a huge part of it, and it
Oh
seems
God,
silly.
ADR.
Yeah, and everyone hates ADR, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's the only way to get clean audio in that setup. And doing that, and considering that in the main industry, I see people using super expensive mics and gear to be on set and record sound, knowing that it's all just scratch. And so, like, all that being in mind is that even the pros, when sound gets bad, they don't even use all that expensive gear. And and in those situations when they're just basically having a scratch mic, they could be using a Rode Video Mic Pro and it wouldn't make a difference to them because it's a scratch mic. So, like, that being said, don't think that just having great gear is going to sit there and take care of all these situations, because it doesn't even work that well for the pros.
Oh, I can't stand doing ADR. It's the worst. Like, there's nothing automatic about it. But
No.
when you say automatic, did you see the Adobe demo of the new auto dialogue creation
Auto
system?
ducking.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. So if you guys aren't familiar with this, and I'll try and get a video in the show notes, but they basically were able to have someone talking to a microphone for maybe 10 sentences or so, and use that to reconstruct almost anything you could think of for them to say. And
Oh yeah.
you're thinking like, well, that's probably not going to be very good. But between the emotional analysis of the video and so on, they're able to nail it with audio. I mean, not perfectly, like there's still a little bit of roboticness to it, but so close that if you were in a pinch and you just couldn't do something with it, or your actor died or something weird like that, I feel like you could probably get by with something like this. And it was amazing.
I can't wait to try this out, because in certain situations in the corporate world, I've had scripts where I know exactly what they're trying to say, but the person on camera stutters a lot, and I would really like to see if this technology could make up for the fact of someone stuttering and not getting their lines right. And it'd be trivial for me then to add the text I want them to say, because it's already in a script format. So it could definitely change up my workflow if it really does produce the quality across all different types of voices and things like that.
Now, goofy Adobe products aside, did you ever actually use that warp cut for anything?
A few times, yeah. Very
Really?
rare. Yeah, it really needs to be a special event. Like, they made it seem like it was really gonna be good to use, but I see it in use actually a lot online. I don't know if people don't see that there's artifacts, or they don't care that it's pretty obvious that there's a weird cut in there. I've used it only when it works, and it doesn't work perfectly to my eyes that often. I mean, we're kind of talking about the difference between like CGI movies in the 90s versus today. So it's like, if it's totally seamless and me as an editor and a video maker, I can't tell that there's a cut in there, then I'll use it. But otherwise, no, I don't touch it, because it'll make things move weird. Their eye will like blink, but it'll be open at the same time. There's weird stuff that happens, and you really need a still background. So I haven't found many cases to use it, but there has been a few times where I put in an edit point and I look at the two images and go, those are pretty close. Let me try that out. And then fooling with it, I can kind of get it to work. But it's few and far between. It's not some kind of silver bullet.
I'm really happy that Adobe keeps iterating on the software so fast, but it's been sort of disappointing too, because some of the features, I feel like because they have free time and lots of money now, they're just like, I know you didn't ask for this feature, but guess what we're going to give you today? Blow your mind with this thing that looks really cool in this one demonstration that you're going to see, but it's not going to provide any real practical use to you at all.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about the stuff that actually is things that people have been asking for that they have delivered on. Because I feel like this update did a lot.
Because I pay my freaking $60 a month. I'm not always happy with what I get.
Me too. Especially with some of the crashes that have been happening this year, I've been upset about. But it seems like they've really worked on like workflow stuff, which I absolutely love. I'm like, this is the stuff that needs improvement. This is the stuff that needs automation to it. So first off, you can remove gaps. Traditionally, I would click like the empty space between two clips, and then hit the delete key, and that would be an easy way to delete gaps. Now you can either take your entire sequence and remove all gaps, or highlight a selection and remove gaps inside of that selection.
What?
So yeah, so it takes something that sometimes, depending on how you laid out clips or whatever else, would be like, oh, here's like 6 scenes and a few gaps and stuff. You could do all that in one click, which to me is like huge.
That's actually really useful. Ripple delete. So I work with an editor who likes to like put all of his scenes in the same timeline, but he leaves like a 4-minute air gap between the two.
Right.
And so
instead of multiple sequences, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, well, why don't you nest this crap, you jerk? And so you end up with this really long timeline with a bunch of empty gaps in between, and you're like, what do I do with these? And you end up having to go through like 20 or 30 different spaces and like ripple delete all the way.
You zoom out, you zoom in, delete, zoom out, zoom in. Yeah.
So that's ingenious. I'm happy.
Along with that, opening multiple projects, I mean, it's always been kind of possible to import previous projects into a project, which is what I've done to kind of like work things around. But this is where you can actually open up 2 project files at the same time. And so you can click and drag clips in between. You could reference things from each project. So that I think only affects a few different kind of workflows where you need to like pull stuff from a previous episode of something or.
No, that's super sweet. Really, I should have read these. And I just was like poo-pooing Adobe, and then so I work on revisions of feature-length films. So right now I'm editing a feature-length with my co-editor Matt, and what happens is like we'll have older revision and newer revision, and he won't pay attention to what he's working on, so he'll do a bunch of editing in the wrong revision of the timeline that has updates that I've worked on in the other revision. So then I end up having to import his timeline into my timeline and then like strip out the crap and put it back in again. It would be super sweet. I'm excited. Okay. Thank you, Adobe. I'm done complaining. This is actually really good.
So, and in that same vein, they also now have access for multi-editors through cloud. Now, I haven't been able to get try this out yet. But supposedly you'll be able to have both editors open up the same project. I don't know if this works across the internet. I imagine it does.
Autosave.
The way that works is that each editor has the ability to lock a timeline so it cannot be changed until they release that lock. So it kind of works like the older Avid system. I believe the newer Avid systems actually let people work simultaneously. But like the older Avid system, an editor could lock a sequence and then someone else could reference it, watch it, edit things around it. But, obviously that timeline is locked for that person. So it's kind of a pseudo way of allowing multiple people to get their hands in on each project, which I'm looking forward to because I'm actually, there's a high visual effects, After Effects kind of project, which I mean, still most of it's done in Premiere, but for a lot of stuff that I'm going to need to work with 3 or 4 other people simultaneously in the event that one of us gets sick or one of us doesn't have time because it's a bunch of freelancers, and being able to kind of like lock a project, work on it for a bit, unlock it, someone else can then work on it, and I don't have to worry about sending files or doing anything like that. Could be super helpful. So another thing that people have asked for too is more labels, because I guess 7-8 colors wasn't enough. Yeah. So now I think they have up to like 16, and you can choose which colors they are too, which is crazy. So you get to pick the colors. Of course, you could always pick the names, but you have way more labels to work with. You can also now do a lot of templating with the live text, which includes setting an origin point. So if it gets imported into another project with different resolution, or you want to change the length of it. Holy crap. You want to change the length of it, where let's say it animates in and animates out. You can tell Adobe kind of where those marks are. So then when you click and drag it on your sequence, it still like does the animation out no matter where you trim it to. So that way you don't have to like keep moving your keyframes every time you've animated something. And I'm hoping to maybe see some of this apply to video as well, not just the live text stuff. Probably one of my favorite things though coming to Audition is auto ducking. So now you don't have to bring down the music bed by hand. You can set up a few parameters and it'll automatically bring down when somebody talks and bring the music back up when they stop talking.
Oh, so that's nice.
Yeah, for corporate videos and a lot of things like that. It's not typically something you do in the narrative world, but for a lot of corporate instructional videos, things like that, super beneficial to be able to click a few buttons, and then it'll automatically show you, too, where on the timeline it's going to duck and not. And it actually uses that audio as a reference track. You'll say, this music bed, I want the volume to go down by this much, by this threshold, upon this vocal track, and then that way it's looking ahead at that vocal track to know when to duck and when not to. So that could save me a whole lot of time, because I would do that by hand and then we'd re-edit the audio and then I'd have to do it again by hand. So
I actually keep a fader at my desk for that purpose. You can just actually
Just to
watch the
record?
video. Yeah, just record your fader position as you're going. And since you've edited it already, you basically have a feel for when to come down
Yeah.
with music and when to come up. And then that way, and I know that it takes like real time, but it seems like it takes me even longer to go through the timeline and add nodes and move the audio around. It's sort of a pain in the butt to do it that way. So,
Well, and
oh, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say the reason why it doesn't take me quite as long as real time is because mostly I'm just looking at waveforms, and then I'm just expanding that and using the pen tool to drop audio up and down. So I kind of just go through it really fast, rough, and then I do listen it through to make sure like I didn't screw up somewhere. But yeah, different ways to do it. If I had a fader, I'd probably end up doing it that way. But I've just become used to using the pen tool to adjust audio keyframes over time.
So there's two options if you're into that sort of interaction. There's a really great NLE app, and I forget what the name of it is. I should have had this at the top of my head, but you basically just put it on your Android tablet, and via Wi-Fi it connects to Premiere, allows you full control. The app's like $20, and worth it if you're doing that sort of thing. Or if you want to be on the cheap and you have a MIDI controller for doing like basic music and whatnot, the sliders on those can be assigned to Premiere features, which give you the ability to control audio levels on the fly, as well as some of the things like fading and so on. Now, Devin, you mentioned the text parameters for changing the location. Did they ever fix that thing where you have to like reapply a transition, like a fade to black or something like that, when you're trimming up the end of a clip?
No, and I think that's probably not something they would change.
That would be really nice. Like sometimes I just want to trim a little bit off of a clip and ripple delete
instead of roll the edit back. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And it would be great if my transition just followed that with me.
No, I think that's because it would cause more confusion. For your workflow, it obviously would make sense to do that, but I think for other people, the kind of the concept that like I make a cut here and then that cut does other things and brings in effects and things like that. It would be cool if that was an option you could switch on and off, but as far as I've heard, no, and I couldn't imagine them doing that in the future.
Okay, I'm old-timey. I understand. I get it. All right. Okay, moving on. There's a few new lights out there. I think last time we did a show, didn't we talk about the new aperture lights? Because Aperture has been like nailing it out of the park lately. And so if you haven't checked out those, the new Storm, I believe they're the Storm lights are out, and they look pretty sweet. I'm really liking what Aperture is doing with all of their lighting kit right now. Congratulations. They're doing a great job. And they also have some incredible sales on last year's products on eBay. If you go check that out, I think the last year's Storm lights are down to $440 for a pair, which is like that's a quarter of what they were last year. So check that out. But Devin, what about this guy? Yet another studio.
Well, yeah, this one looked interesting. I haven't gotten my hands on it, been able to try it, but they're advertising really high ratings, a TLCI of 96. And what I like about this one is that for roughly the same price that you would get a 120D from Aperture, you're able to get a bicolor. And when you look at the lumosity and everything else, the luxes, it's about the same brightness you're getting. On this light, it kind of depends because obviously if you go towards a colder or warmer, you're going to get slightly different intensities. But having a spot flood effect, as well as having bicolor, and then the barn doors, but it's also looks like it's some kind of a bow and mount or something like that, so you'll be able to attach different things to the front of it, different lenses and stuff. So it just to me was like, man, this looks like a really good deal, and they're advertising really good numbers on the light quality. So, and you can get it in V mount and whatnot. So it's just one of those where I'm so, I'm bombarded all the time on like Facebook and everything else with seeing Aperture lights that when something comes by and like surprises me for like a price and maybe slightly more features, I'm kind of like, well, dang, let me try that out. So I've been keeping my eyes on that because I've been looking for trying to get a bigger light kit and get some more power. So I've been studying what Aperture's got going on, as well as looking at some of the other lighting companies.
Here's the deal I was talking about from earlier this week, and it looks like it's still $299 per light. I think you can, if you look around, you can get this set of 2 for 500. But they're the light storms from last year, and they're still pretty sweet. Come with a controller and the XLR power and all that business for a really reasonable price. I didn't realize that the latest generation LEDs had gotten this cheap, and I haven't been in the market for studio lights for like 3 or 4 years. I'm still using a bunch of older stuff that's I think only 85 rating CRI. So
Yeah, no,
and I mean it works fine. Like, so then it's like, why spend another $1,000 on lights?
No, I mean, absolutely. Part of the reason for me is because I've really wanted to get. I mean, I still really want to get that that Aperture Tri-7 because I've been using the older Amarans for a long time. I like their battery life. I like that they got good output. It's just the pricing on that smaller panel, which is supposed to be kind of like part of their cheaper line, but it's now kind of priced up where like Lightstorm, because you see what the Lightstorms look like, and you're like, yep, that's a lot of power for less than this, Tri-7 thing. So it's one of those things that I'm like trying to weigh it out and be like, is this really the light I want to go with, or are there better options out there currently? I mean, something to keep in mind, the Lightstorms that you just brought up, those do not have a lens, so they do throw light everywhere, which means that they aren't going to get the light very far and they're not going to punch. But as a flood, as a fill, they're super great at that. And obviously, it's pretty easy to, it doesn't take too much diffusion to make them soft because they are just the SMDs. They are just throwing light everywhere. Yeah. Some of the other Lightstorms are focused, as well as all the Amarans are focused. And then when it comes to the like 120 or 300D, those are as focused as whatever lens you put in front of them because they're naked otherwise, and you can throw lenses in front of them. So yeah, I've been looking at all these because it's been time for me to get some more power behind some of my lighting gear.
So you know what I've been jonesing for lately? And they've actually dropped down to a price that I might want to pick a few up. Remember when the 1 foot by 1 foot flexible LED light panels were somewhere in the range
Westcott,
of $1,000? Check this out, Devin. These guys right here are $120. They're not super amazing, but I mean, they come with a controller. They're flexible. They also come with a nice mount. They're easy to use, and they're super cheap. And every time I see one of these flex lights, I'm like, ooh, I could use one of those. I could get like a couple. And if so, this is the eBay price. I don't know how many of you out there are willing to risk it and go to Alibaba, but if you swing over to AliExpress.com, you can find these in bulk, like buy 4 or 5 of them for like $85 to $90 a piece. Wow. If you're buying like 4 to 6 of them. So if you have a reason or you want to go in on like a big group buy, they're definitely something to check out. And I couldn't believe how cheap these were getting. And it looks like people have just gotten smart to stitching in some of those, foldable, flexible LED light strips into like nice white material. Because if you look close on this, Devin, I mean, really, that's all it is. That's all it is. Yeah, and they put a nice reflector and a white fabric behind it and stitched it all onto a panel and then wired it up, and bam, Bob's your uncle. It's pretty sweet. I need to buy a couple of those, actually.
Well, they're not the only ones. I think I've seen 1 or 2 other companies come out with something pretty similar to that, just but clearly not that exact factory that's making them. But I've seen a lot of companies advertising for the past 2 years from NAB about having flexible lights, but none of the major brands have come out with it because I feel like I've talked to a lot of Korean and Chinese companies who are all like, hey, here's our flexible lights. And I'm like, okay, when can I buy it? And they go, we don't know. So it's one of those situations where we're seeing a few come out, and I'm really surprised that they aren't becoming more popular. Maybe there just isn't as much demand for these flexible lights than we thought.
So we've talked about camera gear. We've kind of run the gamut here. You want to talk about new CPUs, or do you want to talk about another light?
No, let's talk about CPUs.
So if you guys have been paying attention to the CPU market, we had the Ryzen series of processors hit the market, which offered up all of the cores for what is a pretty reasonable price. They are still out there. The price has dropped, and that is because Intel has announced the i7 8700K, which is 6 cores, 12 threads at a price of around $380 to $400. These are going to be hard to find initially, but it's sort of a fire back to AMD because AMD has offered up such good products. The Ryzen prices have dropped significantly as of this announcement, and this 8th generation CPU has been known to be clocked up to 5 gigahertz without issue. Devin, I know your CPU is long in the tooth, and even mine, I am rocking a 4790K, which is now, I think, about 4 generations behind.
Yeah.
You gonna buy?
This is a brilliant time to buy, and I've been considering it too, because 1151 too just seems like a well-tested, like, solid socket type to go with, as opposed to, like, you know, I was kind of looking at like 2011 V3 sockets and things like that. And it's funny that you say that, because just like a few days ago, I was like re-overclocking my CPU to like 5.2 gigahertz or something, because I'm trying to squeeze more power out of it.
Wait, what are you running in your system that you can get up to 5.2 gig? Is it like an older
is it
Cabby Lake or something?
It's 2700K. Yeah.
Oh, 2700K.
Yeah, it's ancient, man. I know, it's ancient. So no, this is a perfect time to upgrade. It's really hard for me to justify buying new CPUs, because every year it's maybe a 12% increase in power, maybe 15%, and it's just like really diminishing return compared to, you know, what you pay when you first get one of these CPUs. But now at this point, this is probably close to 3 times the power I have now, maybe 2.4 times the power I have now, for less than $500. I feel like that's a no-brainer. You know, it's just the usual thing where I got to get a new motherboard now, and then that's going to be DDR4 RAM, so I got to get to that finally.
RAM prices have gone crazy too, man. In the last like year and a half, RAM prices are up by 40 or 50%.
Yeah, totally crazy. And at least now I've got an upgraded GPU, the 1070. So I have like some GPU RAM to help me with Premiere and encoding and things like that, because that does make a huge difference, especially for the amount of color work and things I do. GPU is super big, and I've been playing a lot with Resolve, and Resolve really loves GPU power. So
that's the other thing that's out there, guys. If you don't have the money or the time to do Bitcoin mining, you can now get a GPU that's a little bit cheaper, probably a little bit more common, and will be easier to find and less popular with Bitcoin people. The GTX 1070 Ti has hit the market, and it is about 550 more CUDA cores than you get out of the GTX 1070, and because of its thermal capacity, is less popular with the Bitcoin miners, and therefore the price has not been driven up to some crazy astronomical level that no one can afford. So definitely a graphics card to check out. Devin, what about graphics cards? Have you made the jump? Are you still running some older 90s?
No, I'm up to a 1070. I bought a 1070 right before the Ethereum took a big jump and everyone bought 1070s. I want to say I got a 1070 for under $300, which seems ridiculous now. But yeah, I got a really good deal, and then when I went back and checked like a month later, because I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna get a second one, it was astronomical. There's no way I was gonna be able to afford it.
Yeah, I think a 1070 right now will set you back around $500, and Bitcoins are up to like $650 or $6,500, which is just out of control. I'm no exception. I've been using all 4 of my 1070s and 1080s for Bitcoin mining, which and that's why I'm actually looking at computer parts right now, guys, because I've managed to rack up about $2,000 in revenue Bitcoin mining, and I want to waste it on the latest gen CPU and an upgrade to my system. I've also been eyeballing. I don't know if you saw the new Microsoft Book 2, Surface Book 2 that's been released. That actually. So I'm not a Mac user per se, but I've always been a little bit jealous of the MacBook Pros. But in the last, 3 years or so, the MacBook Pros have kind of been stagnant. It's probably the word I would use. They're not nearly as powerful. They don't offer nearly as much in value. And although looking sleek, they aren't the latest and greatest. And Microsoft, surprisingly, has been offering some rather sexy looking hardware in the last couple of years, and it sounds like with the Book 2 they've actually ironed out some of the issues, but it'll cost you as much as a MacBook Pro I think the top end model is in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, which is out of control.
Yeah. It is out of control. Yeah, no, and I double checked too on that 1070 because I was curious. Yeah, I got a Founders Edition for like 300, which now you can't even find anything under like $400 for a 1070. So, geez,
that's nuts, man. So I'm casually opening up a box here because I wanted to point out the other thing that's on sale right now on Amazon. If you guys are looking, warehouse deals yesterday and the day before, these 6 terabyte hard drives for $149.
Really?
And I mean $149. But these are not just the regular ones. These are the Seagate Barracudas, 5-year warranty as well as 2-year data recovery. I just upgraded my NAS. Well, I'm in the process of upgrading my NAS. It's rebuilding right now. I've got 6 of these going in to my system. So that's going to replace all of my 4 terabyte drives. And I couldn't believe the price on these. I think they're back up to $229 right now. But if you don't use Camel, go check it out. Add these to your watch list. And holy crap, is space getting affordable. And the reason I bring that up is, Devin, did you also see the announcement from Western Digital?
No, I don't think I did.
So
it's been a while since we talked.
This is hard drive nerdiness, and I'm always excited about more space. My current house hard drive storage space is up to, I believe, 65 terabytes in storage total for all the crap I have to take care of. But Western Digital announced the possibility of using microwave energy to heat the space as they're writing, which will allow them drive densities up to 40 terabytes in the next 5 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It's crazy. What I've been doing lately to save money on drives is actually buying the Western Digital externals.
And drive shucking?
Yep. Damn the warranty. Because you can find those on eBay for about $200, and the 8 terabytes they've been using for their externals are actually the helium filled drives or whatever they are. So they're pretty decent drives, just slower drive speed. But for my NAS, I don't care because it's all archive storage anyways. But that's a really good deal on the Barracuda. I'm excited because I keep thinking that like data density is gonna, like with physical magnetic disks, is gonna like just hit a limit, and then people keep finding a way to break that limit. For me, like flash storage, it makes sense how it gets smaller and we keep like expanding it, and we have like we can keep squeezing space out of those chips. But man, like 5 years ago, I thought this is how much we're going to get on a platter. And if you want more, we're just going to stack new platters and make a new standard for drives. And yet that hasn't happened. And it's really fascinating to see how much technology has gone into improving these. Hopefully for like a lot of this stuff too, because a lot of these higher densities and stuff requires, it's helium, right? That they shove in these drives.
Yeah, I believe once you get above 6 terabyte, you have to start doing some special air density crap. Otherwise, the drives can't spin fast enough.
And hopefully we won't run out of helium, because so far it looks like in 2020 we're going to run out of helium. So
what?
Yeah,
is that legit? Are you just making that up?
Legit? No, that's legit. I mean, we'll probably find more deposits and more reserves, but at the rate that we're going through helium right now, apparently the U.S. reserves of helium will projected to run out in like 2020 or 2022. So keep that in mind. Some stuff that uses helium, the price may go up astronomically once we start running out of it.
Huh. So the other thing I wanted to mention with these drives, I was doing some read-write tests on the individual drives before I threw them in. The new 5 or 6 terabyte drives come with a 256 meg cache built in, and I was actually getting sustained continuous writes of 10 to 15 gig at about 200 meg without issue, which like I was really surprised, and I was trying to figure out how the hell the drive was doing that. And it turns out that because there's like 6 platters in there, or 5 platters in there, they're able to have write heads writing on multiple platters simultaneously. So your throughput on these drives is actually twice as fast as the previous generation of 4 terabyte drives. I was quite impressed with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not even really, when it comes to mechanical drives, there's not even a reason to raid them anymore because you don't need the speed in terms of doing a raid 0 or a raid 10 or something like that. Because I've been impressed too with seeing some of these numbers coming out. Like in flash storage, they're doing 3D matrices and everything else. But yeah, just the fact that we're increasing density means that things don't have to move as far to write data. And all of a sudden, like, we're getting more speed and more space simultaneously. So really fascinating stuff.
So we're getting trolled in the chat room, Devin. Both of us
Oh
are
yeah, we are.
balding. So yes, I agree. The only reason I keep this hair, because it is ridiculous, there's almost nothing here, is my wife is shorter than me, guys. And she looks up and she thinks I still have hair and she doesn't let me shave it. Otherwise, it would be way cheaper to just shave my head than to continue to get haircuts for this stupid little bit of hair that I do have. So what do I do?
Absolutely. No, I buzz it at home. I don't care anymore.
All right, so we've talked about drives. We've talked about hardware. I am definitely upgrading. Last thing on the list here, I was going to talk about the new Sigma Sony glass, but let's save that for another show. What do you've got this weird light in the show notes, Devin.
Sure.
We were kind of discussing this before. It looks like you can control it with an app. You can do some interesting things with it. Why is this a thing?
It looked cool to me, even though it's a Kickstarter. Keep in mind, warning, it's a Kickstarter. Whatever caveats that brings with it. What I liked about it is, one, it's the first time I've seen this tech reasonably priced. Every time I see some kind of lighting for film on Kickstarter, everyone wants like $800 to like $2,000 for some kind of kit. These bars are coming in at about $300 a pop. And this is one of those where I could see myself just needing one, not necessarily multiple of them. But even then, it doesn't seem too terribly expensive. In this situation, these lights are totally programmable, and I mean that like in a very extreme way, where you would think the kind of lighting things you can do with it would require some kind of programming language, but they don't. They seem to have a really great interface put together on Android and iOS for programming patterns and flashes and movement, because you can also have lights move up and down and collide with each other and do all kinds of things. DJ was talking about having artifacting with that CMOS rolling shutter and causing there to be breaks when you have like flashing photographers or lightning effects or things like that, where on a light like this, you could set it to, fade up for a few milliseconds and fade down after a few milliseconds, and it's going to completely eliminate those issues of rolling shutter. It's going to greatly reduce the kind of artifacting you'd see with that, while still having most of the effect there. You don't have an instant on and off, and that's what'll help to get the same effect as a flash, but not obviously have the same problem. So I like, probably the biggest thing for me is that it doesn't require the app. Like, if you want to program it and do the fancy color effects and everything else, yeah, you need to use the app. But once you're done with the app, all those effects are recorded inside the light. It stores up to like over 100 profiles. And you're then able to sit there and, do all kinds of fancy effects without pulling your phone out. You switch to what you want, you say go, and you can, they got lots of things they show on the website. DJ, if he switches over to his camera, you can see them. You've got, police lights, you can do campfire effects, candlelight effects, you can do interrogation scenes, you can just do really cool, nightclub looking lights and stuff like that. So it's one of those where I really see the ability to move the light too, and not just like flash different colors, could really come in handy in lots of ways.
Ooh, that glowing. Okay, so I was not sold on this originally, but now I'm watching these silly little animated GIFs and thinking like, oh, I could think of a reason to have that light. I could probably do something with that. I don't need another light. Damn it!
You don't need another light, but it's cool, isn't it? It's so cool.
Oh.
But it's a Kickstarter, which means that you won't see it for 3 years, and then when it shows up, half of the bulbs will be dead.
Oh, okay, so before we go, guys, one last thing I wanted to show you, and this is actually pretty sweet. I am finally getting something that I crowdfunded quite some time ago, and I was showing Devin this before the show. If you guys may remember, I was talking about some CNC projects, and this here is actually showing up. I got the email today. It'll probably be shipping in about a week. But this is the Shaper Origin, And if you're not familiar with this, it is a computer vision CNC tool that allows you to basically put strips of tape across a piece of work surface and then figure out where it's located on the work surface and continue to cut whatever you're working on. You do have to guide it, but it'll correct your motion up to 3 inches of travel off and allow you to cut beautiful things out of wood, metal, or what have you. I ended up pulling the trigger on this in 2016, and it's finally going to show up. So that is
and
actually,
it's super expensive too now, isn't it? If you just wanted to buy one today.
I think I dropped $1,200 on this, and now if you want to sign up for the pre-order, the next group of people won't be getting theirs until the middle of next year. I think it is 2,000 and some change. So sorry if you lucked out. I don't know if I actually need this, but it might make a good immediately list to eBay.
Well, you might get some decent profit out of that. It is a fascinating tool, and especially if it works as advertised. I just noticed another company, I was going to link you, DJ, does the exact same thing in a different way. Where
Are you
you
talking
set
about
up,
that 3-wheel
driving? With the Omni wheels and things like that. It seems like a similar concept, but
Did you see how that one actually works, though?
With the magnetic strings, yeah.
It has tethers on all 4 sides, or on 3 sides of the material to determine its position in space. That one is kind of interesting, but wheels on sawdust?
Yeah,
how are you going to do that without like slippage?
Well, but at the same time, unlike something that would be tracking itself in terms of wheel movement, it's tracking itself with the tethers. So if there is slippage, you would think the programming could compensate for it because it would know when it has slipped and when it hasn't.
Oh, that's not the part I'm talking about. Like,
you're just talking about torque.
Yeah, like literally cutting the material requires force being applied in a given direction. No. So either you go really, really, really slow and you reduce the amount of friction on the cutting head, or you don't cut very accurately.
Now you make a good point. Maybe when it comes out, they'll be like, yeah, that totally works if you have 1/8 inch plywood.
Yeah, or maybe it works great with 3/4 inch plywood, but you just have to wait 3 days for your item to be cut.
Jeez. Yeah,
it's still pretty sweet though. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Again, I have been doing a ton of CNC stuff lately, and it is actually it's profitable. So if you're in the market to try and start make custom cases or something like that, the hipsters these days seem to really love organic wood cases for everything. I don't know what's going on in this world. So anything else you want to cover before we get out of here, Devin? That I think we've done just about an hour.
Yeah, no, we have done an hour, and I think we've covered a lot. So,
all right,
until the next month?
Until next month, when Devin and I return with another episode. These guys out there, I know these have been spaced sporadically. We get together when we can. Devin has been working a ton at Red Bull, and I've been working a ton, period. My new job has caught me by surprise, so we'll do these when we can. But bear with us as we limp along and continue to try and keep up with what's going on in the camera market. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Devin, you want to take us out with whatever?
Hey, keep shooting. Keep shooting.
Words to live by. We'll see you next time on another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. And my Chrome just froze.
Yeah, you're still live, though. Your video works.
Video works, huh? So I can't see anything, and I cannot hit stop. So there is no way for me to stop this recording.
Yeah. Well, Soli, while we're still live, I guess, I'll respond to Soli because he was talking about the Quasar Science guys. They do have some really great lights, and the RGB elements and stuff like that look really solid. The only thing that's programmable on them is dimming. Where the other lights on Kickstarter are like a pixie light from Adafruit, if you're familiar with that, where they're individually assignable. So the app allows you to do a lot of creative things between what colors each of the LEDs are, so they can simultaneously show multiple colors, as well as then doing animation with that. So that's what makes it a bit different. I do remember they were on Kickstarter as well, the Quasar Science guys, and they do have a real great product. And unlike the one we talked about today, their product actually has DMX control, so you can actually build it into an existing system, which can be super great if you're doing stage lighting or you're working on a bigger set or something like that. But the other one's more of a hobbyist, like all contained light unit that relies on the app to work. So if they stop developing the app, or the app doesn't work with your phone, you're kind of screwed. I mean, besides the basics, you can pick a color, pick a brightness, and a few other basic things on the interface, but you're not going to be able to program it without the app. So, yeah. So, I mean, by all means, it seemed cool, and it seemed like a good price considering like the Quasar Science thing. I think for one of their tubes, it's like $450, which probably pumps out a bit more light than the Kickstarter guys, but obviously not as much flexibility in programming.
Oh man!
And yes, DJ, you're still there.
I am. I know. I'm struggling. Apparently, one of my CPU cores is just spiked to 100%. I think I accidentally opened up one of those Java pages that is forcing your computer to do Bitcoin mining.
Oh, geez.
So it has locked up my entire system, and I think the only way to end the show is
to force quit.
So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, guys. I think by the next time we do an episode, there may be a new computer in my office because this is just ridiculous. So thanks for showing up, Devin, and I'll see you next time, man.
See you guys.
Goodbye, Chrome. Control-Delete. Task Manager. And in process. Will it let me?